back. We are continuing now with our story, an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, and I'm with you on page 486. We are keeping at level 1 in our annotations a summary of the things that have happened in the story, especially now at part 3, where he falls into the water, the rope snaps. His hands are free. He's able to free the rope from around his neck. He's come to the surface. He's now exiting the surface of the water, the creek itself. And now, what happens next? I'm with you on page 486, second paragraph. He had come to the surface facing down the stream. Is everyone ready? All right, here we go. Continue to make your list of things that happened.
He had come to the surface facing down the stream. In a moment, the visible world seemed to wheel slowly round, himself the pivotal point, and he saw the bridge, the fort, the soldiers upon the bridge, the captain, the sergeant, the 2 privates, his executioners. They were in silhouette against the blue sky. They shouted and gesticulated, pointing at him. The captain had drawn his pistol but did not fire. The others were unarmed. Their movements were grotesque and horrible, their forms gigantic. Suddenly he heard a sharp report, and something struck the water smartly within a few inches of his head.
They're shooting at him.
His face with spray. He heard a second report, and saw one of the sentinels with his rifle at his shoulder, a light cloud of blue smoke rising from the muzzle. The man in the water saw the eye of the man on the bridge, gazing into his own through the sights of the rifle. He observed that it was a gray eye, and remembered having read that gray eyes were keenest, and that all famous marksmen had them. Nevertheless, this one had missed.
Okay, so the next thing you're going to write down at level 1 is that as he is exiting the creek, shooters with firearms start trying to kill him. And in fact, he even is able to see the gray eye of a sniper or a sharpshooter who has him within his sights, and points out even that he can see the grayness of his eye, and remembers that all great snipers have gray eyes. But thankfully, the sniper has missed him. So now maybe he's going to be able to get away.
A counter swirl had caught Farquhar and turned him half round. He was again looking into the forest on the bank opposite the fort. The sound of a clear, high voice in a monotonous sing-song now rang out behind him and came across the water with a distinctness that pierced and subdued all other sounds, even the beating of the ripples in his ears. Although no soldier, he had frequented camps enough to know the dread significance of that deliberate, drawling, aspirated chant. The lieutenant on shore was taking a part in the morning's work. How coldly and pitilessly, with what an even, calm intonation, presaging and enforcing tranquility in the men, with what accurately measured intervals fell those cruel words. Attention, company! Shoulder arms! Ready! Aim! Fire! Farquhar dived as deeply as he could. The water roared in his ears like the voice of Niagara, yet he heard the dulled thunder of the volley, and rising again toward the surface, amid shining bits of metal, singularly flattened, oscillating slowly downward. Some of them touched him on the face and hands, then fell away, continuing their descent. One lodged between his collar and neck. It was uncomfortably warm, and he snatched it out. As he rose to the surface, gasping for breath, he saw that he had been a long time underwater.
All right, so here we go. We'll write down the next thing. He hears all of the soldiers are being told to all aim their weapons at him simultaneously and shoot. He dives down under the water to escape the bullets, and he can even see some of the bullets going through the water past him, flattened out because they've hit the water, right?
He was perceptibly farther downstream, nearer to safety. The soldiers had almost finished reloading. The metal ramrods flashed all at once in the sunshine as they were drawn from the barrels, turned in the air, and thrust into their sockets. The 2 sentinels fired again, independently and ineffectually. The hunted man saw all this over his shoulder. He was now swimming vigorously with the current. His brain was as energetic as his arms and legs. He thought with the rapidity of lightning. The officer, he reasoned, will not make that martinet's error a second time. It is as easy to dodge a volley as a single shot. He has probably already given the command to fire at will. God help me, I cannot dodge them all. An appalling flash within 2 yards of him was followed by a loud rushing sound, diminuendo, which seemed to travel back through the air to the fort and died in an explosion which stirred the very river to its deeps. A rising sheet of water curved over him, fell down upon him, blinded him, strangled him. The cannon had taken a hand in the game. As he shook his head free from the commotion of the smitten water, he heard the deflected shot humming through the air ahead, and in an instant it was cracking and smashing the branches in the forest beyond. They will not do that again, he thought. The next time they will use a charge of grape.
Now, the next thing that happens is he realizes that they're shooting a cannon at him, right? That hits the water right next to him and makes the water go way up over him. And then he thinks to himself, the next time they're not going to shoot a cannonball at me, they're going to shoot rather little small amounts of munitions at me, spreading out around so that way they can kill me.
I must keep my eye upon the gun. The smoke will apprise me. The report arrives too late. It lags behind.
Top of page 488.
That is a good gun.
First main paragraph.
Suddenly he felt himself whirled round and round, spinning like a top. The water, the banks, the forests, the now distant bridge, fort and men, all were commingled and blurred. Objects were represented by their colors only, circular horizontal streaks of color. That was all he saw. He had been caught in a vortex and was being whirled on with a velocity of advance and gyration that made him giddy and sick. In a few moments he was flung upon the gravel at the foot of the left bank of the stream, the southern bank, and behind a projecting point which concealed him from his enemies. The sudden arrest of his motion, the abrasion of one of his hands on the gravel, restored him, and he wept with delight.
He's free.
Dug his fingers into the sand, threw it over himself in handfuls, and audibly blessed it. It looked like diamonds, rubies, emeralds. He could think of nothing beautiful which it did not resemble. The trees upon the bank were giant garden plants. He noted a definite order in their arrangement, inhaled the fragrance of their blooms. A strange, roseate light shone through the spaces among their trunks, and the wind made in their branches the music of aeolian harps. He had no wish to perfect his escape, was content to remain in that enchanting spot until retaken.
So the next part is he steps out onto shore, and in the moment that he steps onto the shore and realizes that he is free, he has escaped, notice again, all of the senses heightened. He can smell much more clearly. He can see again really clearly. He is so unbelievably happy that he's made it, that he literally is ready to just kind of stand there in the sunshine when all of a sudden, look what happens next. Of course, they're probably not ready to give up quite yet, letting him escape, right?
A whiz and rattle of grape shot among the branches high above his head roused him from his dream. The baffled cannoneer had fired him a random farewell. He sprang to his feet, rushed up the sloping bank, and plunged into the forest. All that day he traveled, laying his course by the rounding sun. The forest seemed interminable. Nowhere did he discover a break in it, not even a woodman's road. He had not known that he lived in so wild a region. There was something uncanny in the revelation. By nightfall, he was fatigued, footsore, famishing. The thought of his wife and children urged him on. At last he found a road which led him in what he knew to be the right direction. It was as wide and straight as a city street, yet it seemed untraveled. No fields bordered it, no dwelling anywhere. Not so much as the barking of a dog suggested human habitation. The black bodies of the trees formed a straight wall on both sides, terminating on the horizon in a point like a diagram in a lesson in perspective. Overhead, as he looked up through this rift in the wood, shone great golden stars, looking unfamiliar and grouped in strange constellations. He was sure they were arranged in some order which had a secret and malign significance. The wood on either side was full of singular noises, among which, once, twice, and again he distinctly heard whispers in an unknown tongue.
So he escapes, runs all day into the night, running through the woods. Strange observations, though, are made. Did you notice a few of them? For example, the road seems untraveled. It's a road that he doesn't recognize, that he's ever been on before. The road seems to be lined by trees, and there's no plowed fields on either side of the road the way that he is accustomed to. He looks up into the sky and he sees the stars, but he sees them in strange formation, constellations, not like he normally is accustomed to. And then finally we want to write down, he hears voices, whisperings, but in a language he is unfamiliar with. Jot down what you think is going on here at level 1 as we finish our story. Let's pay attention now. Read closely. It will reward your reading to read word for word now the end of this story. I told you this is one of the strangest stories you're going to read. Read the ending with me.
His neck was in pain, and lifting his hand to it...
Top of page 489.
He knew that it had a circle of black where the rope had bruised it. His eyes felt congested. He could no longer close them. His tongue was swollen with thirst. He relieved its fever by thrusting it forward from between his teeth into the cold air. How softly the turf had carpeted the untraveled avenue. He could no longer feel the roadway beneath his feet. Doubtless, despite his suffering, he had fallen asleep while walking. For now, he sees another scene. Perhaps he has merely recovered from a delirium. He stands at the gate of his own home.
He's home.
All is as he left it, and all bright and beautiful in the morning sunshine. He must have traveled the entire night. As he pushes open the gate and passes up the wide, white walk, he sees a flutter of female garments. His wife, looking fresh and cool and sweet, steps down from the veranda to meet him. At the bottom of the steps she stands awaiting, with a smile and an ineffable joy, an attitude of matchless grace and dignity. Ah, how beautiful she is! He springs forward with extended arms. As he is about to clasp her, he feels a stunning blow upon the back of the neck. A blinding white light blazes all about him with a sound like the shock of a cannon. Then all is darkness and silence. Peyton Farquhar was dead. His body, with a broken neck, swung gently from side to side beneath the timbers of the Owl Creek Bridge.
Now, before we say anything about the end of the story, I want you to figure it out on your own. Write down at level 1 what happens at the very end of the story. He runs all night. He goes through the woods. He hears these strange voices whispering. He doesn't know the language. Then all of a sudden he is at his house. Yes, I made it. He walks through the gate. There is his wife. Beautiful. She reaches out her arms for him. He reaches out his arms for her. He gets ready to give her a hug. And then all of a sudden, bam, back of his neck is snapped. Last line of the story, he's swinging below the Owl Creek Bridge. He has been hanged. So I don't understand what happened. What happened in the middle part of the story? The beginning of the story is easy. He's standing on the bridge. The plank goes up. He falls in. And then at the end of the story, he's hanging at the end of the rope. What's going on in the middle part of the story? And one or two readers of this story have said, really? You made us read the entire story to get right to the end and then find out, oh, he didn't escape at all. He never escaped. The rope never broke. He never fell in the water. He never was shot at. He never ran all the way through the woods all day and all night to get to his girl. He simply hanged as he fell between the railroad ties of the Owl Creek Bridge. Ah! Some readers of this story feel kind of cheated, like, how dare you? Here I was, totally pulling for this poor guy who was trying to get away and escape, and then in the last second, the writer is going to completely change for us the outcome of the story, and no, he actually is dead. But wait a minute. If you realize at the end of the story what has happened, then you realize that everything you're reading in part 3 of the story is imagined, a dream of a kind, right? And you start going back and paying attention to the language, and you go, oh, I should have known what was going on just from the description in the language. Let me give you a couple of examples. Notice, for example, on page 488. I'll just work with you. Well, let's go to 486, right? First of all, he thinks he has escaped, and we're told he had come to the surface facing down the stream in a moment. On the first major paragraph of page 486. And in a moment, the visible world seemed to wheel slowly round. Himself the pivotal point. If you are hanging on a rope, what does your body do? Right? It twists. Look at the next paragraph. A counter squirrel had caught Farquhar and turned him half around. Of course, if we're reading this, we're thinking that it's the water that's turning him around, when we realize, oh, if I had been a closer reader of the story, I would have already begun to kind of figure out or guess he's hanging at the end of the rope, turning. Look at the page 488. Ambrose Bierce will play the same game again. Suddenly, first major paragraph, he felt himself whirled round and round, spinning like a top. And some of you will go, oh yeah, I've heard about this. When people hang at the end of a rope, they will turn, their bodies will turn. Right, keep going. Notice we have a continuation of this. Spinning like a top. The water, the banks, the forest, the now distant bridge, fort, and men, all were commingled and blurred. Objects were represented by their colors only. He'd been caught in a vortex and was being whirled on with a velocity of advance and gyration that made him giddy and sick. Of course, he's walking down a road he's never seen before, where there's no planting on either side of the fields. He looks up at the stars, but he sees them in a constellation that he's never seen before. He hears whispering in a language he doesn't know. And some of us will say, oh, if I'd been paying closer attention, I could have guessed that some of what was going on was not real. By the way, did I have anybody in this reading who kind of figured it out early on? This guy is dead already? Excellent. I've got a few of us that were reading and already guessing something's going to happen at the end of the story, which is going to be a major letdown. Let's exegete now our final annotative work. We'll start at 2A. At 2A, messages, themes. Jot down one for you as a possible message or theme about this story. Maybe some readers will say, this story suggests that at the final moment of death, we have a tendency to think about the people who we love, the people who we will miss, the people who we would like to be with. There is, of course, always going to be speculation about what dying is actually like. Ambrose Bierce playing a little bit of a game. Notice that in our story, death is not something that frightening for Farquhar. Rather, he is going to have an experience that almost we would say is pleasant, especially at the very final moment. Almost like a relief, we might say, right? At 2B, we can, of course, make quick observations here. This is the surprise ending. Yes, this is an ending where we're going to play a game with the reader, if we're the writer, and you're going to get all the way to the end of the story and then go, whoa, 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 what did I just read? What? He's dead? What do you mean he's dead? I thought this was an escape story. Notice we began by saying this is an execution story, but it's also an escape story, right? Okay? So in other words, it works both ways. At 3A, Let's ask this question real quickly. What for you is your favorite movie, TV show, or video, or even video game, where an execution takes place? Do you have a movie that you're familiar with where the person who's about to be executed does escape? What is for you your favorite movie like that? Not just where an execution takes place, but rather where somebody gets away, right? Okay. We have lots and lots of examples of films that play this same game. Cold Mountain, you might write down as a title of a film that's a little disturbing because it follows the same game of a Civil War soldier who goes through all of the experiences of getting home, only at the very end to succumb to a terrible, terrible, tragic moment, okay? What is for you the film that, like this story, is the major shock ending of all film or TV shows you've ever seen? In other words, you assume something is happening, and at the very end of the text, something totally different happens. Do you have a film that works like that for you? Again, one of the reasons why we ask a question like this is to try and help you remember the story by, again, linking or relating it to a text that you already know well, one that has a similar kind of experience, like the ending. Finally, 3B. This story resurrects a lot of different kinds of questions. Questions about how we read, questions about how we expect things that then don't happen. Have you had a moment in your life when you expected something to work out and it did not? Quite the opposite, in fact. Can you jot down a time that happened in your life? Another 3B question. What do you imagine you will think about at the moment of death? If, for example, it is a person in your life, who will that person be? Can you jot down who maybe that person would be for you? If